When we think of the American Civil War, what comes to mind? Probably massive land battles, right? Gettysburg, Antietam. But a huge and, you could argue, the most decisive part of the war was actually fought on the water. Today, we're going to dive into that story, drawing from the classic work of naval strategist A.T. Mahan to look at the gritty, brutal, and frankly, brilliant war for the Mississippi River. So let's start with the huge problem facing the Union back in 1861. The Confederacy was massive. It was a continental-sized territory. Invading it is one thing, but how do you actually conquer it? How do you subdue that much land? Well, the answer is simple, and it's strategically beautiful. You don't just march your armies across endless miles of land. You seize its vital arteries. You go for the jugular. And for the Confederacy, the single most important artery in its entire body was the mighty Mississippi River. And that insight led to the Union's grand strategy, what we call the Anaconda Plan. The naval part of it was like a giant pincer movement. The idea was to have one powerful fleet, a northern hammer, smash its way down the river from Illinois. At the same time, a second fleet, a southern anvil, would push its way up from the Gulf of Mexico. The goal? To meet right in the middle and literally cut the Confederacy in half. So why was this river so important? Because the Mississippi was everything to the South. It was the logistical superhighway. It connected the resource-rich states in the West, places that provided soldiers and, as Mahan notes, an abundance of food, to the armies fighting out east. You control that river, you choke off the rebellion supplies. It's that simple. All right, let's look at that first arm of the pincer, the Northern Hammer. Now, this was not your typical Navy, not by a long shot. This was a weird purpose-built fleet made specifically for the strange challenges of fighting on a river. This is what's called a brown water navy. So forget everything you know about deep blue oceans. These sailors were dealing with crazy strong currents, sandbars that shifted constantly, and enemy cannons firing down on them from high bluffs, sometimes just yards away. It was a whole different ballgame. You know, Mahan himself had this incredible description for the ships they built for this job, the Eads-class Ironclads. He said they looked like, well, like that. Gigantic turtles. I mean, can you picture it? These weren't graceful ships. They were slow, ugly, industrial beasts designed to do one thing: fight. And if you look at their design, everything about them was a direct response to the river environment. They had flat bottoms so they wouldn't get stuck on sandbars. The armor was sloped, which was a brilliant way to make enemy cannonballs just glance right off. The bow was packed with 2.5 inches of iron because they were designed to steam straight into enemy fire, bows on. Even the big, vulnerable paddle wheel was tucked away at the back, protected by the hull. These things were basically floating tanks. Okay, so that's the hammer from the north. Now let's jump all the way down to the other end of the river. Pushing up from the Gulf was the Anvil, Admiral Farragut's fleet. And these ships were the complete opposite. Powerful, but totally conventional. Wooden, ocean-going steamships. The thing is, these ocean ships were not ready for a close-quarters river brawl, so they had to adapt, and they got incredibly creative. They stripped down all their masts and rigging to make themselves smaller targets. They literally draped massive anchor chains over their sides to act as makeshift armor for the engines. They even smeared mud from the Mississippi all over their hulls for camouflage and, get this, whitewashed the decks so the gun crews could see what they were doing in the dark. Just ingenious. And the Northern Hammer began to fall hard. In early 1862, those iron turtles just methodically smashed through the Confederacy's northern river defenses one after another. First Fort Henry fell, then Fort Donelson, then the major fortress at Island No. 10. It was a slow, grinding, but totally relentless advance south. So this really shows you the two very different forces at play here. Up north, you had the Hammer, slow, powerful ironclads, purpose-built for methodical sieges. Down south, you had the Anvil, fast wooden steamships, adapted from the ocean fleet, making these incredibly daring, high-speed runs past enemy forts. Two completely different tactics, but both absolutely essential to the plan. And speaking of daring runs, what do you think this number is? Over 100. That's roughly how many heavy cannons Farragut's wooden fleet had to steam past in the dead of night to capture New Orleans, the South's biggest city, in April of '62. An absolutely legendary move. But the Confederacy was far from done fighting. In July 1862, they delivered a shocking counterpunch. this monster of a Confederate ironclad, the CSS Arkansas, came steaming out of a tributary river and, as Mahan tells it, just fought its way straight through the entire combined Union fleet waiting above Vicksburg. It was a brutal reminder that this war was a long way from over. And that brings us to the climax of the entire campaign. The two Union fleets, the Hammer from the north and the Anvil from the south, were finally closing in on the last Confederate bastion on the river, the fortress city of Vicksburg. Vicksburg was everything. You see, its geography made it a total nightmare to attack. It was perched on these 200-foot bluffs that overlooked a sharp bend in the river, giving its cannons a perfect field of fire. It was the key, the final lock on the Mississippi, and as long as it held, that Anaconda plan couldn't work. The siege of Vicksburg was just a masterclass in how an army and a navy can work together. The Navy's role was absolutely critical. First, the Ironclads had to make another terrifying run past the Vicksburg guns at night. Then, they acted as a ferry service, getting General Grant's entire army across the river so they could attack from a weaker side. After that, they blockaded the river, cutting off all supplies to the starving city. And finally, for 47 straight days, they just bombarded the fortress, nonstop. And on July 4th, 1863, literally one day after the huge victory at Gettysburg, Vicksburg surrendered. The lock was broken. The Mississippi was open. The Confederacy was officially cut in two. Its backbone was snapped, and the river was now a Union highway all the way to the Gulf. Looking at a chart like this, you really get a sense of the scale of this whole thing. This wasn't a quick strike. It was a nearly 2-year struggle of sieges, river battles, and amphibious attacks, all leading up to that final, grueling, 47-day siege of Vicksburg. And President Abraham Lincoln? Well, he captured the massive strategic importance of this victory with these famous words. It's just poetic, isn't it? The long, bloody fight for the continent's great artery was over. The Anaconda could finally, fully, tighten its grip. So we'll end on this thought. Mahan's history showed, beyond a doubt, that wars are often won or lost by controlling these vital waterways. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the strategic arteries of today in the 21st century? Are they still physical choke points like the Suez Canal or the Strait of Hormuz? Or have the Vicksburgs of our times shifted to cyberspace, to global trade routes, maybe even to those undersea data cables that connect us all? It's something to think about.